All right, welcome guys to another episode of Behind the Visual, the podcast where I interview all those people responsible for the images and videos you see out in your world every single day. I am your host, advertising and lifestyle photographer Mark Hansen, and today my guest is Facebook creative director Toby Kaufmann. Toby is also the creative director of Purist. If you don't know what Purist is, listen to this podcast to find out because it is a very, very cool thing. In this episode, we talk about all kinds of stuff. We talk about how she got her start as a creative director. We talk about how she went to school at Parsons, but before she did that, she worked on the trade floor at the New York Stock Exchange. So that's a huge difference in jobs right there. So definitely check that out. We're talking about how she had a huge part in changing the landscape of models you see out there when there were no curvy plus size models. She helped make that more of a normal kind of thing that you see today all over the place. So she is responsible for that as well. We talk about some of the images that she has on her website. And with one of those shoots is with Westworld star Evan Rachel Wood. Really cool shoot. You guys need to definitely check that out. And God, all the other kinds of stuff she has done. She's been all over the place. She's done a lot of cool stuff. She was Facebook and Nike were both trying to get her. Facebook won out. You need to hear that story and find out why. But definitely check this one out. Let me know what you think. Leave me some comments, thumbs up it, like it, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. And I look forward to hearing what you guys think. So here we go with the episode. Where did you grow up? In West Coast, or did you grow up someplace else?
I grew up in New York, in Manhattan, but I went to high school in Northern California. So when I did move out here from New York, it was like I had some understanding of what I was getting myself into a little bit.
So why'd you move from New York? Was it like your dad got a job, mom got a job, something like that?
No,
or you just like, screw it, I'm gonna move out there.
No, I think it was like the idea of growing up in a bubble, right? Like, and the idea of having a different experience outside of just like growing up in New York and experiencing something else.
Right.
So I think a little bit of that wasn't so much like a family thing. It was just more of like a wanting to expose the kids to other culture.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. I'm grateful for it. I'm like,
weather's better.
Weather's better. I was like terrible teenager. So in many ways, it was like a safety net, right?
Yeah.
Like so much less dangerous than New York. So I was able to like do all my crazy teenage stuff and not get into trouble and not get arrested and not die and all of those things.
Well, that's probably a bonus, I would think. Well, not getting arrested and not dying part.
Exactly.
For sure.
Yeah.
So how long were you? Okay. Did you go to school out there, or did you go to school back?
So after high school, I moved back to New York pretty much immediately. And I took a year off between high school and college. I worked on the trading floor of the commodities exchange. I started when I was 17. Yeah. It's pretty wild.
Is that what you wanted to do? Did you want to be a broker or something?
No. My sister like knew someone and I needed a job, and they were like, yeah, totally hire a 17-year-old who knows nothing about anything. So
I have a friend of mine who did that one summer as an intern, and he said they have the worst diet. It's like nothing but pizza and hot dogs, and they eat as fast as they possibly can, and it's just awful.
Yeah, it was a pretty wild place. Like, it was back when there was a smoking room, right? Like there was like an actual space that people went because they couldn't afford to have the time to like actually go outside.
Right.
I'm sure it's different now. It felt kind of like the tail end of like that, like fratty broker situation that I think was really like known for. I'm sure it's different now to some degree.
Right.
But yeah, it was pretty woman on the floor of
But again, you were what?
The youngest woman on a trading floor. Yeah.
Oh,
and
wow.
like being terrible at math, which like no business being on that floor at all. But, I think the positive part of it is that it really taught me. I knew I wanted to study photography and I knew I wanted to go to art school, but I think at that time I had a lot of friends that were going to school at Cooper Union for art, and they were sitting around talking about so many amazing things. And I was really jealous that I wasn't learning those things and that
Right.
I wasn't in school. So then when I actually got to school, I was a lot more focused than like a first year
Yeah.
would naturally be from high school into college. So I feel really lucky and grateful for that 1 year kind of gap year, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. I can see
Mhm.
that for sure. When did you start like into photography and into the artistic kind of stuff? Was that when you were very young or did it come later? Or?
I mean, both of my parents are artists, like just natural artists. My dad kind of did a lot of different things, but he studied painting and sculpture. And my mom is performance, like singer and
Oh,
actress.
wow.
So a lot of that was really valued in my growing up, and taking us to art shows and museums and being around other artists. My dad started one of the first flea markets in New York, so I was
Wow.
around a lot of kind of random people, a lot of artists, but also a lot of like fashion designers and like architects and things like that. So it wasn't like there was never a moment where I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be a doctor. Like that was not the thing.
Right.
So I think I connected very early with art and the idea of communication design just generally. And yeah, and then really knew very quickly that I wanted to study photography. I did a summer program in at SVA.
Hmm.
And I think that just definitely solidified that I was like, okay, ready to like commit and study this, even though like no idea what I was doing, no idea what it would mean as a career, no
Right.
idea how I would like repay my student loans or any of that. But I think there's like this beauty of being a kid and just being like, and having the ability to
Yeah.
follow the bliss, right? And follow the thing that you're interested in.
Yeah, that's why I keep telling both my daughters. I'm like, they're 18 and 21. And I'm like, you have plenty of time to screw up, go do everything you think you want to do, try the jobs you think you want to try. And if
Mhm.
one lands, great. And if it doesn't, no big deal. You
Yeah,
can still go off and keep on moving. I said, when you get later in life and you got a husband or kids and all that, you don't have the latitude to kind of just say, I'm going to quit this and go do that anymore.
totally. I mean, and I think that we're as a culture really bad at saying find something that you're interested in and focus in on that instead of being like, I'm going to be an accountant, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a
Yeah.
dentist. Like, well, is that the thing that really moves you? Or are you just doing that because they're perceived as stable things? And I also recognize I'm hugely um, lucky and privileged in the position that I've been in. So I know that's not always the case for everybody, but I think trying desperately to find something that you really care about and are passionate about and seeing how that evolves over time is important.
Oh yeah, I agree. I think it was Jim Carrey who was talking at a commencement or something and said that his dad was funnier than he is.
Mm.
And his dad was a great comedian. And he said, but he was always too scared to go and try and follow that dream. So he took a safe job as an accountant with a safe company so he can make the money he needed to make to pay for the family. So he took the safe job. That company went out of business. He was lost his job. They ended up being homeless. He said, so he failed at the safe job. He said, if you're going to fail, go ahead and fail at the job you're dreaming of and the dream you love, as opposed to the safe job that you may end up failing at anyway and you don't like it.
Totally.
And
And being flexible, right?
yeah,
Like, things may not be exactly the way, like, I'm not exactly what I thought I would be when I started Parsons, but I've been flexible and being through that flexibility and happiness.
yeah. I think you're completely right. And that's why I told both girls I'd rather them just be happy and try and figure out what's going to make them happy and do that, as opposed to I need to do this because that's going to make me the money and it'll be okay. Because my oldest daughter, she's never going to make the kind of money she needs to make. I was just like, you need to find a job where you make $1 million a year and then marry some dude who makes $1 million or $2 million a year. And then maybe you'll have the life that you're looking for. So what she really wants to do is with horses. So I don't know. It's going to be tough to make that kind of cash, with a horse farm. So you never know.
And then the other thing is like, you're not what you do, right? Like
Yes.
that's the other thing I've spent a lot of time breaking up with. Like there's so much of my identity is wrapped up in what I do, but it's not who I am, right? It's one aspect of my personality, one thing that, yes, it's important, but it's not the thing that is defining me as a human.
Yeah, I agree. And I think hopefully mine have learned that early because they both were volleyball players and they were defined as volleyball players. And my oldest stopped playing earlier. She stopped playing after her sophomore year in high school. And my youngest finished out all of high school playing, and now she's not playing anymore. But they were both defined themselves as volleyball players. And then they've had to figure out that that's not who they are. That was just a piece of them, and they move on. And I think that's good. They found it out. They found that out early, as opposed to, getting into, like you said, finding a job and ended up being like, this is who I am. This is not just a piece of me. This is me. It's this job that I hate, or
Totally.
whatever it is. Yeah.
Totally.
So, okay. So you moved out to New York. You worked on the Florida Stock Exchange. Totally random. And then what'd you do after that?
So I quit and went to Parsons, did a direct entry program into Parsons and studied photography there for 4 years, which was incredible experience. Like, again, like no idea how I was going to make money, taking on a huge amount of student loan and just kind of like with a blind confidence of youth being like, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure it out. I'm a hustler. I'm going to figure it out. And thank God I did, because it would have been terrifying had I not.
Yeah. So what did you do when you came out of school? You graduated? Did you have a job lined up when you graduated, or is it one of those where you graduated and you're just trying to figure it out?
Well, I graduated May 2002, so post 9/11, and there were no jobs.
Yeah.
It just did not exist. There was just nothing. It was, massive layoffs. So a friend of mine actually had a job at a cookie company, like a well-known New York City cookie company. And she was their photographer. And she was like, they like to hire artists to ice the cookies. Are you interested in doing that? And I was like, I've never iced a cookie in my life. They'll pay and I will figure it out. And I iced cookies. And I sold them at this store in the Chelsea market. And I will never forget, I was interviewing, I was trying to like hustle my way, and I was selling cookies, and I got a job from the person that eventually hired me, asking me if I would accept the position. And that was for, at that time, her name's Elizabeth Sinzaba. She was the director of photography for USA Network, Sci-Fi.
Oh, wow.
And she eventually evolved as the executive director of photography for NBC. So that was like my big break, I would say, is like, kind of working as an assistant level for her. But I was so fortunate. My boyfriend at the time, who turned into my husband, had interned for her. So I was able to kind of like work that connection a little bit when she was looking for someone full-time, and just, right place, right time, right hustle.
Yeah.
And it really gave me my first real job.
Oh, that's very cool. How long were you there?
God, I haven't thought about this in so long.
Yeah.
I guess I was there for like a year and a half or 2 years.
Okay.
I would say.
So what were you guys working on there?
So she was in charge of all of the billboard photography, all of the gallery photography, all of that, sending unit photographers to cover the coverage, to cover the taping, and figuring out when to do that strategically, and also like continuously pushing the creative. Because like I think at this point we take for granted what that might be, because I think a lot more people have those jobs with Netflix, with Amazon Studios, like that. But back then, the idea of like unit photography, not that many people really knew what that was. And there wasn't, we're still shooting slides. We still had to get approvals for everything. It was like back in the ancient days.
Yeah.
So it was interesting also because she was pushing the digital aspect of things and dam management, which was like kind of a cool time to be there as well.
Wow. Yeah, that's very cool. Was she accepting of digital right at first, or was that something where she was like a little hesitant of it?
I mean, I think that it was pretty clearly the future at that point. And I think that like everyone I've worked with for the most part has been like very future focused. I think the people that were dragging their feet are really no longer around.
Yeah.
And it is
I had
kind
a few of those clients.
Yeah, it's a good lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like nothing is going to stay the same. If I had rejected all of the changes in my life, like I really would not be where I am today. So I think that definitely is the number one takeaway, like for anyone. I think it's just like embrace the change and be curious about it instead of being like, no, I'm not going to do it that way.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I agree. And because I've seen photographers that are just like, they still have issues with the way things are being done. Even if they're shooting nonstop digital and they love it, they still have issues with certain things and how it's being done. And I'm like, you got to move on. You can't complain about the fact that this is being done this way, or they're using these people or this person to shoot it, and not somebody who has the background that you have or whatever. It's just, you've got to move forward, because if you don't, you're going to be stuck and you're going to be hating life.
Yeah.
And wish you had moved forward. You went there, and I saw look, you did some magazine stuff after. Was it right after that, or was it before? I mean, not before obviously, but
yeah, after that, all my friends were like working at magazines at the time from college, and they were all like living the magazine. Like it looked very glamorous from the outside. And
that's when magazines still had some money.
They still had some money, and we still did some fun things. And I knew someone who was at one of the laddie magazines in the heyday of like those Maxim and stuff. And that kind of just started me on a men's magazine track for a while. And I did that for a while. I worked at Maxim, at GQ, Men's Fitness. So I was really on like men's magazine cycle for a while.
Yeah. Wow.
It's a small group, right? It's the same people that are kind of like bouncing between all of the places.
How was it working on the magazine compared to NBC stuff and compared to Facebook now? Is there a big difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think that at my core, like I would say pre-directorship, it was my work is very different than the work after I got my first directorship. And I think with that first directorship, I was hired to reimagine something, which is something that I've been consistently hired to, is like remake something, reimagine it, or implement it as a new. So I'd say I kind of divide it that way rather than like magazine versus brand work.
Yeah.
Because I think the things that I've cared about are the things that I've cared about the entire time, which is like diversity, equity, inclusion. I know it's a very hot topic now, but something that I was working on, even before Maxim. Even at Maxim, I was hiring a lot of women as photographers, which is not something that had historically happened.
Did that make the models feel more comfortable having women shoot it, or was there really no difference?
I mean, I think it's all in the approach. And I would say, yeah, probably. Like, I think also I would differentiate between models and celebrities, right? Like models, I think, are used to kind of many different situations versus celebrities, which I think typically I would say are more comfortable in more revealing situations. If there's
Right.
a woman on set, myself,
Yeah, absolutely.
or as a woman photographer.
Yeah, well, that makes sense
Mhm.
for sure. Did you have like a certain amount of time with every celebrity? Like, hey, you got
Everything,
15
every shoot
minutes.
is different. Every shoot
Yeah,
is different. Yeah, I mean, usually we'd carve out a whole day
right.
and really try to like do the whole thing and, video and interview and the whole thing. So,
Oh,
but
wow.
at this point, like I haven't done that in so many years because after I left men's magazines, I joined a women's magazine for about 2 years, and that closed. And I was kind of like, I don't know what I'm going to do. What's my next move? Magazines close. And I got a job at Refinery 29, which is like then the big switch into digital and
Yeah.
just being not as a print person, but as like a creative strategist, um, as someone who's really trying to figure out new ways to tell stories in a sea of digital and how to capture people's attention very quickly.
Yeah, I would think that's a little bit of a change.
Definitely a big change, but I think also like so grateful for that change because that sets me up just to understand. Just when I started there, people were like, what is Refinery 29? All my
Right.
magazine. To me, it was just so clear that it was the future, right? It was like there was so much being invested in it. The stories that we were doing were all stories that I think are now really taken for granted,
Hmm.
that we were talking about back in 2015. So it's good to be ahead of the curve with that. And
Oh,
I'm
absolutely.
grateful for that.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, because I can't. It seems like this is really like if nothing else, 2020, as bad as it was, it seems like it's pushed all the inclusion, all that stuff into the forefront of everything more, and more people are paying attention to it. Now, I don't know if it's because of all the stuff that happened, or that people were just stuck at home and they got to see it more and pay attention to it more. And now finally, and then I'm sure that digital media, social media is helping push it as well, where before it wasn't.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's probably a three-prong thing, right?
Yeah.
All of those things helped. And for me, it's like the challenge is now it's like, how do we keep that conversation going? How do we
Mhm.
make it not a trend, but a consistent practice?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So with Refinery 29, you were there. How long were you there?
Like just about 4 years.
Okay. And then you ended up going to Facebook after that?
So I was burnt out a refinery and I just took some time and just needed to like regroup. It was it I just needed some time. And so I started a small studio in Brooklyn that was just me. And I was working mostly with NBC and Apple. Um, and then I was just kind of like figuring out what my next move was, if I wanted to stay as a one man band or I wanted to start thinking about other opportunities. And then actually, Nike and Facebook reached out at the same time
Oh,
about
wow.
roles. So, kind of parallel path those. And Facebook is just the one that ended up making the most sense. And I accepted and moved out to California for.
Wow. All right.
Pretty wild.
Yeah. Wow. That's impressive that both Nike and Facebook just reached out to you. Was it like a LinkedIn thing, or did they hear your name, or were you like putting out feelers for that kind of thing, or how that happened?
I mean, I'm someone who desperately believes in like manifesting the thing that you want. And so I just started telling everybody in my life what I wanted. And they were like, because everyone was like, what are you going to do next? And I'm like, well, this
Right.
is what I want. This is what I want. This is what I want. And, you say that to enough people and it makes it to other people's ears. And I'm really grateful that I have a lot of amazing women in my life that are able to promote me and promote my work and speak my name in rooms that are maybe not in reach of me or
Right.
what were not in reach of me. And yeah, we just made that happen.
Wow. That's impressive. That's very cool. Okay, so you get to Facebook. I don't necessarily think of Facebook as a company that has a creative director or does a lot of photography. So, how did that work out? What do you do there? I mean, that's what I'm really curious about is what kind of happens at Facebook? I mean,
Yeah.
what do you do there on a kind of daily, monthly basis?
Yeah. So I would say this. So Facebook has 60,000 employees, which I
Wow.
think is also surprising to people. It's
Yes.
like
Yes,
quite a
it
large
is.
company. And there's so many creative directors on kind of all end of the spectrum. They're creative strategists, they're creative directors in illustration, there's creative directors in motion. So there's many of us.
Oh, wow.
And specifically what I do is I work within the Facebook app. And when I arrived, there was really no photography within the app, basically at all. And the photography that was in the app was kind of very traditional Getty lifestyle work. So the first order of business was to have a vision of like what it would be like, what it would feel like, what the jobs to be done would be. Um, and the good news is when you introduce a new craft into a giant company like Facebook is that you look around at the other crafts that are happening, and illustration was super successful within the app and had a lot of success in it. So I started just talking with them to figure out exactly why that was, and I took a lot of my like vision from some of the strategies that illustration had employed,
Right.
and it's worked out quite well. And I think when you look at the work that I've done, I post most of it. I'm lucky to be able to post most of it on my Instagram, but it has still quite an editorial angle and a point of view, which I think is also why it's been successful. Is there's a heart to it. There's a social aspect. There's an identity aspect to it. So that, I mean, it took about a year to get the vision approved and socialized to everybody. Um, and then it's just kind of evolved from there and become quite successful.
Wow. That's impressive.
Yeah.
So I guess
It's
they're
like
happy they hired you.
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, if I had thought too deeply about what I was doing at the time, I think it would have been paralyzing to some degree. But I
Yeah, I
think
can see
like
that.
just having some sort of just faith in yourself that what you're able to do has been thought through and there's a lot of principles around it. And then really hoping that the audience connects with the work.
Yeah. Wow. Damn, that's very interesting. Yeah, all of that to me, because I mean the 60,000 employees, the whole thing you're talking about of redoing the photography and on the app, which none of that ever registered in my head as a thing at Facebook.
Yeah, I would say people are pretty surprised when that happens because we're not marketing. There's a whole other set of marketing,
Right.
and I think people are more used to seeing those billboards or those digital campaigns, but the tone and the voice of the app is something totally different.
Yeah, that's very cool. So how do you find the photography for the images? Do you shoot original photography or do you just find photography that you like from photographers and ask to, buy it from them or whatever?
So yeah, I have an amazing team and I have an amazing like external production team that either is able to license imagery that we're interested in or do original shoots based on it. We also do a tremendous amount of collage. So we work with a lot of collage artists. Um, and and they're either able to source their own photography or we're able to support in that way.
Right.
But it's a multi-prong approach, I would say, for sure, in terms of getting the best quality imagery.
All right. So you guys are kind of all over then as far as where you get your photography from.
Totally. Yep.
Oh, well, that's very cool. Yeah. Wow. How long have you been at Facebook now?
I just had my 2-year anniversary,
All
which
right.
went so quickly. It's wild.
Yeah. What would you do with when in lockdown? How'd that work?
Yeah, we really great question because we had just gotten the vision approved in February of 2020. And then of course lockdown happened. So how do you do that? And we utilize several organizations, but one that really was helpful was called The Loop. And we would create briefs and they would execute on them, and we would just buy the imagery from them directly.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, and they have photographers around the world, and they were really great partners, especially in that time where, really Facebook just wouldn't, we weren't allowed to shoot anything because obviously COVID.
Right.
Um, but they had so many people that were locked down with their families that were able to produce amazing content.
Are you guys back to shooting, pretty much back to normal shooting?
I don't know if we're ever going to be back to normal shooting.
Right.
Obviously, we're still extremely cautious about everything, and everyone wears
Yeah.
masks, and we still have COVID officer and all of that. But my production company handles all of that, thankfully, and they have our guidelines, and we don't have to think too much about it.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Very cool. Yeah, well, it's interesting 2 years you've had then, for sure.
Ones I will never forget.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
for
not.
sure.
God. All right. I want you, so tell me, out of the magazines, Facebook, Refinery, all that, what's one of your favorite projects that you've worked on?
Yeah. I mean, I always kind of say that Facebook was, or Refinery was kind of the job love of my life, right?
Yeah.
Like I loved that job. I loved what we were able to do. I would be able to dream up wild projects and kind of have my pick of the editors to be able to tell the stories, which is incredible. So I think there's so many stories there. I think one thing that I always come back to is in 2015, which is something that we launched called Take Back the Beach, which was, again, and at this point, it's like normal for magazines and brands to be thinking about size inclusion and diversity. But back then it was like pretty groundbreaking that we would show an actual plus size model in a bathing suit. And it's hard to imagine at this point that, like, what that was like, but magazines were constantly like, get your beach body ready, like that sort of garbage. And so I feel like myself, along with a lot of amazing people at Refinery, we were able to actually create that change in the world, which really is a career defining moment for me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's not because, yeah, back then there was very rarely did you see any kind of plus curvy model, whatever. And now they're everywhere. And I am seeing, Instagram posts like, hey, looking for models, and it's in those sizes, where before you never saw that, you never heard. And I know some girls who are on that plus curvy train, and they are working nonstop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we when we started at Refinery, there was someone there who had a background in casting and had an interest in this. And I was able to develop her and her point of view to be able to push Refinery and get fashion comfortable with that, get beauty comfortable with that, get the brand comfortable with that. And I would say she really should get a lot of that credit as well, just like finding the people that were comfortable playing those parts and telling their stories.
I think that's huge. I mean, I think what you guys did with that was a major game changer, because I had a friend who was a producer at one of these huge catalog houses in New York. And I think one of their clients was, I want to say Lane Bryant. I could be wrong. It may not have been. But they called and said they were going to shoot a catalog, but they wanted size 10 models. And she said, why do you want size 10? That's not who your customers are. That's not what you built yourself to be. And they said, because size 10 sells. That's what we want. And she quit the job. She quit working at the company and moved on from that and just started producing on her own full time, because she was like, this is ridiculous. That they won't even, they're selling to women who are 14, 15, 16 size, whatever. She goes, but they're wanting to put size 10 models, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that actually then from Take Back the Beach, it developed into this project where we did, which was 67%, because that number comes from 67% of women are size 14 or above in the United States. So they represented at that point like 2% of media or something like that. So it
Wow.
pretty dramatic numbers. And again,
Yeah.
I'm sure it's changed at this point, but I think it's still not where it needs to be. And then adding diversity, equity, inclusion into the conversation. It was like when I was coming up as a young photo person, it was mostly white men as the photographers, and, you know, growing other people and, you know, giving people other opportunities and different points of view has been the next step in this whole process.
All right. I hadn't really thought about this, but I want to share my screen. I'm going to pull up your website.
Oh no.
And
I haven't touched it in so long.
it's got some cool stuff on it. So I just kind of want you to just kind of tell me, if I can find where it is. All right, there it is. Just, walk me through some of these shots, like out of everything that's on this front page, what are a few of your favorite images or stories behind these shots that are on here?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, so if you go, well, Gabby Setaby is one of my favorite shoots of all time. We shot the lady in the pink dress.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was shot by Brad Agbana. And this was for something that we used to do at Refinery called Uncover, which was our response to magazines' typical covers.
Oh yeah.
And it was giving space for people who wouldn't typically get covers of magazines. So Gabby Sidibe obviously has gone on to have many magazine covers since then. But we gave her the opportunity, and she gave us her time to be able to be our cover star for that. And it was on all Black crew, which again, at this point, I think people really take for granted. But at that point is a lot more unusual than it is now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to see what else we got here.
I would say Desmond, the little kid on the bottom.
Yeah.
Desmond is amazing. I met him, as I did back then, a lot of times when I was looking for like stories to tell. I met him on Instagram. At that point, he was an 11-year-old drag kid and has like just the best spirit.
I didn't even know that was a thing. 11 drag kids.
Yeah, drag kid. And since then, Desmond has really exploded, got himself an agent, is just like continuously performing and being an advocate for kids that are maybe not traditionally gender conforming.
Right.
I guess one of my other things, the jean story, back up top.
Right.
Yeah,
here.
these ladies in the jeans.
Yes.
Yeah. So we worked with a collective called Black Girl Magic, and they were based at the time in Columbia, South Carolina.
Okay.
And we worked with the founders to cast, I believe it was 7 or 8 women, did an editorial, went to the woods of Columbia. And it was just a very powerful experience to have their voice in this space, talking about sisterhood, talking about camaraderie, talking about like how to raise other people up, and to take us to Columbia, which was pretty cool to see. When
were you in Columbia? What time of year?
Oh God. I feel like it was this was a few years. This was like 2017 at this point, but yeah. I would say maybe it was
must
either
not have been the summer.
or the fall.
That.
Yeah,
fall,
I can't.
Okay. Yeah. It is so hot there in the summer.
Yeah.
My dad says they have a military base. My dad was in the military for a little while. And he said any place there's a military base is probably the hottest spot in that entire state.
Yeah, this one on the left with the older woman with a
Yeah,
bag was really
that's a cool
fun.
shot.
That was shot by Michelle Grosskopf. It was the first project. I've since worked with her extensively, and I currently work with her at Facebook a lot. But it was the first time I ever worked with her. I wanted to shoot older ladies in the like fashion trends of bags. So we went down to Miami, Florida, and same casting agent, Lilac Perez, was able to find, I believe it was like 5 or 6 um, uh, older ladies to be able to model these amazing bags, these fantasy handbags. So that was really fun and a way to again like celebrate other people's stories besides like just typical models.
Right. That shot when I came through here, that immediately grabbed me for sure. Okay, what's the deal? Who came up with the cut in the hole and the black backdrop?
So that was a story that was shot by Leah Clay, who again I've worked with her a lot. Um, I would imagine. I mean, again, I can't. This day feels very long ago,
Yeah.
but I would imagine it's probably her.
Okay.
She has a very unique way of thinking about things and seeing things that's very elegant and beautiful, but also like incredibly intelligent. So I would credit it to her for sure.
All right. Yeah, because that stopped me on that because I was scrolling through here and I saw that. Like, wow. All right, whose idea was that? Because
Yeah,
that's a cool idea
that's
on
beautiful,
that as
right?
well. Yeah. Any other ones that you're just
I mean, I love the flowers. That was we worked with Savannah Ogburn, who at that point was, I think, a junior in at Savannah. I think she's at art school in Savannah, Georgia.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Um, and we gave
SCAD, I think, is right. Savannah
SCAD. Yeah, I think she was at
Ogburn.
SCAD. Yeah. And we wanted to do a red boot story. And so, of course, red boots, you think of Wizard of Oz. So
Ah,
we recast Dorothy as a modern day
is
Dorothy.
that on here? Can we see the whole?
Yeah, the whole
Oh
thing.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So following the yellow brick road.
You know,
And that was our
there's
first.
a Land of Oz in North Carolina up in the mountains.
That's actually where we wanted to shoot this
Oh yeah.
originally. But I believe at the time it was just closed and we couldn't. But again, that's a good example. That was Savannah, who I think junior or senior in college, but I just worked with her on Facebook for a pride collage.
Yeah, how'd you find her?
I don't know. I love to discover new people.
Yeah,
I love it. I mean, I find most people through Instagram. I found Leah Clay through Instagram. Like, I just think that that really has democratized photography in such a deep way.
absolutely.
Um, and I just, again, like I'm obsessed with finding what's going on in various places and happen to find it and happen to work out. And yeah.
Yeah, I'd say it definitely worked out. All right, what's the Selena Gomez shoot for? My daughters loved her.
Yeah, that was Refinery, pretty straightforward fashion story with a
Right.
little bit of movement. That again was an uncover that we did. And yeah, pretty, very beautiful. I think she was, I can't remember what she was promoting, to be honest. That was a few years ago. The Rachel Evan Wood story is actually pretty interesting if you want to click in on that. We had planned to shoot her in this place, which is like, as you can
Oh,
see
this is
behind
cool.
her in the projection.
Yeah.
We had planned to shoot her there, but what we didn't know is the day before the shoot, she had actually testified in front of Congress about rape and sexual harassment,
Oh
and was
wow.
just emotionally like could not make it to the shoot, which of course we understood.
Yeah.
And of course, like, at that point, we go from how do we save the shoe? So I kind of went into this, like, I don't know, I just like sat down and just started thinking and came up with this idea that we would utilize that location that day by having the photographer shoot plates of things that we might want to do. And then in the studio, project these onto her. So you still get this idea of suburbia. And, one of my biggest inspirations is that song, Little Boxes. I don't know if you know that. Very old folk song. It's like this idea of little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look the same. So like the idea of suburbia and what that means in America. And then of course she was doing Westworld. So there's a huge amount of meaning attached to what's real and what's not real. So we were like, I was able to then pitch her that day. We're not shooting today. We totally realized that, but this is what we want to do. And in many ways, I think it actually turned out much better than what the original concept would have been.
Yeah, it's very cool. Yeah, I really like it. I like the whole projecting thing, especially with how
in rough situations, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. Especially, I'm thinking it almost looks like some of these, like her whatever shadow in the back. It almost looks like you just you shot her and then stuck that in there.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's really
definitely did not do that, but yeah, it was like it really worked out very well. And thankfully we had a really great relationship with her team, and they were really excited to be able to actually execute this when she was in just a better brain space.
Very cool. All right, so we'll see if I can.
Yeah, and Holly Andres actually shot that, who's an amazing partner and like very flexible in the day, and was very like cool with the changes, which is great.
Yes. All right, tell me about Pursuit. Now that I get back and see what I'm talking about on your webpage, I'm like, all right.
Yeah, so I met Naima Green, who is the artist that works on Pursuit, in 2018, again through Instagram. I was interested in her work and I just wanted to meet her. And with a lot of people, specifically that are working kind of in both zones of like fine art, but also commercial photography, I usually ask, like, what's your dream project? Like, what if you could do anything, what would you want to do?
Right.
And Naima was gracious enough to share with me that she was interested in reimagining this project that Kathy Obie had done in the 1990s, called the Dyke Deck, which was a series of playing cards that were an ode to her queer community. And Naima wanted to remake it in 2018 and to include her community. So I was like, that's genius. Like, this is exactly what we need in this time. And I said, I know we don't know each other, but I want to make this with you and I want to be your creative director. And to her credit, like, someone you meet off Instagram, she was like, let's do it. So we cast all the people that are currently in the deck. We raised about $35,000 to actually print it. And since then, I also curated a show of hers at Photographiska that actually closed in April, but it was up for about a year, around around Pursuit, but then also around her other aspects of her art practice. So that has been really amazing, and we've gotten a ton of press, and she's just like kind of exploded, now has an agent and like all the things. So it's been amazing to see her grow and flourish as an artist, but also as a commercial photographer.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, look at you working on the side and making things happen too.
I like to be busy, and I can't pass something by. If I'm excited about it, I need to be involved, even if that means that I don't sleep that much in the year that I'm making the thing.
Well, that's good though.
Yeah.
As long as you're enjoying it, that's great.
Totally. Yeah, totally.
Okay. So I got one last question for you.
Mm-hmm.
what is the strangest, most interesting, or coolest thing that's happened to you since you've started this whole business, got into this whole business?
I mean, yeah, that's a good question. I feel like there's can't just be one. I just feel
Well, you can
number
give me
one,
multiple
just
ones. That's
really
fine.
lucky and grateful that I've been able to contribute to the creative community and been able to make some changes within it as well. Like I'm always like, wow, I can't believe that like 17-year-old Toby was right that I can have a career in photography. So I feel really grateful for my peers and people that have helped me along the way. And then I think moments like Pursuit has been a really amazing highlight for me. I worked when I was at Refinery, we curated a show on 29 women that we're interested in supporting. And so curating shows like that has been really exciting.
Oh, wow.
Just telling stories, like traveling, like they're really like, I think the whole thing, like just like having a career, a creative career has been the thing that has been most exciting to me and most satisfying, which I know is not much of an answer, but
Hey,
it is
it is all
true.
right. You said you traveled a lot. Where did you travel to?
So yeah, I mean, in 2020 or 2010, I was in LA like 20 times.
Wow.
Traveled to Brazil. I've traveled to Eastern Europe, traveled to England, traveled to Mexico, Canada. Did I already say Brazil? Yeah, it's been, I'm sure, Caribbean, a lot in the Caribbean, Anguilla, St. Vincent,
That's
like
rough.
Dominican Republic, yeah,
I'm so
Miami a
sorry.
ton, yeah, Chicago. So
Besides
I've been
Miami, where's the sketchiest place you've been?
the sketchiest place. I mean, this was a long time ago, but place I felt most unsafe, and I think it's probably because how we were managed,
Yeah.
like by the crew, the local crew was really concerned that we would be troublemakers or get into trouble. Was probably Rio. Like it felt to me quite unsafe. But again, like I think that was more to do with the local crew being overly cautious about
Right.
us than anything else. I feel like whenever we travel, we have amazing production support that keeps us safe.
That's
So I
good.
haven't felt too unsafe anywhere really,
Well, that's a
thankfully.
plus. That's very good. Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause I've heard some people with some stories, some places that have been
Yeah.
bad.
Not so much for us. Like I feel like we've miraculously stayed out of trouble.
I had a friend of mine, she was just down in Colombia and it
Yeah.
looked very pretty, it looked amazing, but all I was thinking was, don't cartels hang out down there quite a bit? That's
Well,
your
Colombia
cartel
also is
country.
maybe not the best place to be right now. This is pretty unstable. So
Yeah,
I think just generally also as the person that's usually in control of where we're going, I try to steer away from places that may put my crew
that's probably
at
smart.
risk. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably smart.
Yeah.
All right, well, Toby, thank you so much
Yeah.
for
It's great to
being on
talk to
here.
you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you too. It's great meeting you. This has been very cool. I enjoyed all the stories of behind the scenes and how you came up and how you meet the photographers, and it's amazing. And the whole helping to bring the plus size curvy thing into the mainstream, that was amazing. Yeah, I mean that's all really cool stuff. No wonder you had Nike and Facebook trying to get you online. Nike's
Well,
not happy about they
oh,
didn't
I'm
get
sure
you.
they're doing fine. I'm sure they have. Sure they hired the right person for that brand.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one last question. I'm sure it's a question you've gotten like 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Ever met Zuckerberg?
Never met
Okay.
Zuckerberg, but have been in, he has weekly meetings that we all are able to attend and ask any questions that we have. So, not met, but definitely, feel a presence,
Yeah.
right? Like know that he's around and know that he's thinking about, all elements of the Facebook community.
All right. Well, if he needs a photographer when he goes on vacation, you tell him I'm available. I go
I
like
will.
use
I
his
will.
vacations because I'm sure he goes on some. I was shooting the CEO of Lowe's, and he was telling me about how he was on vacation in Africa with his kids on like a photo safari, and then they went to Switzerland or someplace and drove Porsches on the ice over iced over lake. And they said, this summer we're going to rent a yacht for 2 weeks and we're going to go, someplace in the Caribbean. I was like, dude, if you need somebody to shoot that, you need to document your family vacations. I'll be more than happy to come along.
That
And
sounds great. Yeah, I love that. That's a great gig. I hope you get that.
yeah, me too. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank
Please
you.